Hello and welcome to Crime Darkroom. I am Elias Blackwood, and today we will enter a darkness where the truth is hidden. A bloody story, a mysterious figure who shook the world. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a figure who, behind the scenes of terror and fear, led a group that the entire world dreaded. In this video, join me as we dive into the dark world of murder and hatred that this man inhabited, whose fate is directly tied to the rise of ISIS. Where the light has no path, darkness reveals everything. Today, we seek the truth in this darkness. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of this mysterious figure? Let's step in. Just when you think the world has settled, somewhere in the heart of wars and destruction, a group called ISIS emerged. But what is ISIS? ISIS, or the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, is a terrorist group that declared itself a self-proclaimed state in vast regions of Iraq and Syria. Its main goal was to establish an Islamic caliphate driven by its extremist and violent ideology, seeking power through terror and mass murder. Unlike all other terrorist groups, ISIS not only uses military operations to achieve its goals, but also leverages media networks and technology to promote its brutal ideology. This group spreads fear not only on the battlefield but also in the virtual world. But what is most significant in the history of ISIS are the individuals standing behind this slaughter. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, one of the most important and mysterious figures who played a key role in the formation of ISIS. And now, to gain a deeper understanding of the roots of this group, we must delve into the darkness that al-Zarqawi walked through, becoming the catalyst for one of the bloodiest periods in modern history. Darkness always begins at a point, and the story of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi started on a day in June 1966. In a small, quiet town called Zarqa in Jordan, a child was born who would later become one of the darkest figures in modern history. His name was Ahmed Fadil Nazal al-Khalila, but the world came to know him as Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Born into a poor and conservative family in an environment filled with limitations and hardships, a place where dreams were easily crushed under the weight of time and poverty. Yet, something within him was different. From the very beginning, he showed signs of violence, fanaticism, and a desire to fight. It was as if fate was preparing him for a darker path. In his teenage years, Ahmed al-Khalila, the future Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, embarked on a path where the first signs of chaos and violence began to emerge. The young Zarqawi quickly became a troublesome figure on the streets of Zarqa. Street fights, violent behavior, and a disregard for the law all made him a well-known name in the impoverished neighborhoods of Zarqa. Crime always has a story to tell. You just have to listen. During that time, he showed a strong desire for control and power. Among his friends, instead of companionship, he sought to lead. With every act of violence, every confrontation, the darkness within him grew deeper. But there was more than just this reckless behavior. It was as if he was searching for something greater. Power, even in small doses, made him feel alive. Zarqawi not only clashed with the law, but he also began attracting individuals who, like him, were seeking a way out of their circumstances. The small street confrontations were the first signs of the mentality that would later become a nightmare for the world. Every darkness has a tree that grows from it. And on the path of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, there was a tree whose branches reached out to extremism and terror. In the 1980s, while Zarqawi was still shaping his ideology, his fate became accidentally intertwined with one of the greatest extremists of that time, Abu Muhammad al-Maqdisi. Al-Maqdisi, a man who presented himself as an Islamic scholar, was in reality the intellectual and ideological leader of those who were ready to achieve a greater goal under the heavy shadow of jihad. Zarqawi, who was always searching for a way to belong to something greater than himself, found in al-Maqdisi someone who gave meaning to his world of hatred and violence. Al-Maqdisi introduced Zarqawi to the ideology of Salafi jihadism, a philosophy based on takfir, declaring other Muslims as infidels and jihad at any cost. Having once sought power in Zarqa, he was now looking for something that could create an even bloodier world. According to al-Maqdisi, jihad was the only way to salvation and the establishment of an Islamic caliphate. This philosophy led Zarqawi to follow him and begin attracting new followers for groups that would gradually become ISIS. In the early 2000s, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was expanding his terrorist ideologies, was arrested. Having been involved in the wars in Afghanistan and various uprisings in the region, he was captured by security forces after some sabotage operations in Jordan and transferred to prison. But in this confined and dark place where hope and life were distant, something new took shape. Zarqawi became not only an exiled individual in prison but also a mentor and spiritual leader for the other prisoners. Inside the narrow and confined cells, he began to preach his ideology, a philosophy based on takfir and jihad. Many of the prisoners, who were incarcerated for various crimes, quickly became captivated by his words. In the heart of darkness, there are always those who seek the light. Zarqawi found new followers in prison, individuals who had lost all hope in the outside world and were searching for an ideology that would give them a sense of power and purpose in life. These new followers eventually became the foundational pillars of the terrorist groups that later joined ISIS. Behind this dark curtain, something was hidden that no one knew at the time. They were not just ordinary prisoners, but soldiers of a future being trained to continue Zarqawi's bloody path. In this prison, he built a small army of extremists. But were these followers truly seeking justice, or had they fallen into the trap of a dangerous man's ideology? In 2004, after his release from prison, Zarqawi joined one of the most dangerous and extremist terrorist networks in the world, Al-Qaeda. But what is Al-Qaeda? Al-Qaeda is a terrorist network founded by Osama bin Laden in the late 1980s. The group's initial goal was a global jihad to overthrow Western-backed Arab governments and establish an Islamic caliphate worldwide. Through large and small terrorist attacks such as the September 11, 2001 attacks, the group spread fear and terror around the world. But Zarqawi, who could no longer remain within the limited circle of Al-Qaeda, decided to establish an independent identity and present himself as the leader of jihadist groups in Iraq. Alongside Al-Qaeda, he sought to establish a new Islamic caliphate in Iraq. After the fall of Saddam Hussein, Zarqawi entered Iraqi territory, gaining new followers. In this process, he utilized the teachings of bin Laden and Al-Qaeda to launch terrorist operations in Iraq. However, what set him apart from other Al-Qaeda members was his intense desire for ruthless and indiscriminate slaughter. Zarqawi, now seeing himself at the center of the world of terror, was seeking something beyond personal power. He sought a world where fear would be the only truth. After the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, Iraq became a scene of chaos and instability. In this turmoil, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi entered the country, but he was not just an outsider. He came with a dark purpose. For Zarqawi, Iraq was the perfect ground to expand his bloody ideology. He quickly aligned local extremist groups with his cause, building a powerful network of militants and terrorists. Zarqawi used every tool at his disposal to instill fear. Widespread suicide attacks against Shiites, aimed at fueling sectarian divisions. Bombings in public places that claimed the lives of thousands of civilians. But his goal was not just Iraq. Zarqawi sought to use Iraq as a base to spread his caliphate and incite sectarian wars throughout the Middle East. He believed that the tensions between Shiites and Sunnis could lead to the collapse of governments and strengthen jihadist groups. The terror spread across Iraq, and Zarqawi established himself as the leader of terror. Through brutal propaganda and bloody attacks, he carved out a place for himself among global extremists. During this time, Zarqawi pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda and named his group Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who rose to notoriety in the heart of Iraq's wars amidst bloodshed and destruction, could no longer remain in Al-Qaeda's shadow. In 2004, when Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, was embroiled in various conflicts across the Middle East with its global objectives, Zarqawi decided to take a different path. He quickly separated from Al-Qaeda and formed his own group, known as Dawlat al-Islamiyya fi al-Iraq, or ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq. His goal in this separation was something beyond just forming a terrorist group. He aimed to establish a fully fledged Islamic caliphate in Iraq and Syria. To achieve this, Zarqawi needed followers who would pledge unwavering loyalty to him, without any doubt or hesitation. Zarqawi's separation from Al-Qaeda was not due to personal differences, but rather because of ideological differences. Al-Qaeda, which was primarily focused on international political objectives and terrorist operations, initially disagreed with Zarqawi's extreme and brutal methods, which aimed at creating chaos in Iraq and brutally suppressing minorities. Zarqawi, in his views, saw the need for more bloodshed and killings as essential for expanding the Islamic Caliphate. In 2010, when Zarqawi was expelled from Al-Qaeda due to his extremist actions, he began forming a larger and more powerful group. This group soon became one of the biggest global threats, ISIS. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, as the leader of ISIS, initiated a war from the very beginning that not only impacted the land but also penetrated the minds and hearts of people. He was a strategic genius in utilizing violence and terror. Zarqawi's tactics were bloody and ruthless, but within this violence lay a larger, more profound objective. he emphasized sectarian warfare intensely. One of his main strategies was to amplify religious and ethnic tensions in Iraq. His goal was to completely divide society and create deep rifts between Shia and Sunni communities. The civil war he fueled led to even greater fear and instability. And, for Zarqawi, this bloodshed was essential for expanding the Islamic Caliphate. Suicide bombings were one of Zarqawi's preferred techniques. He used this method as a tool to instill fear and eliminate any resistance against him. Suicide attacks, aimed at maximum casualties, became one of the primary terror tactics to capture global attention and intimidate both governments and ordinary people. Just when you think the darkness has ended, Zarqawi sought to break the boundaries of fear and terror. Another strategy he used was targeted attacks against key individuals such as military officers, political leaders, and even religious figures who opposed him. By doing so, Zarqawi aimed to spread fear and terror everywhere, leaving no one safe from the sense of insecurity. Zarqawi, alongside his bloodshed, had waged an extensive psychological war. He wasn't just fighting with bombs and weapons, he was manipulating the minds and emotions of people. This all-out war seemed to transcend the battlefield, as he had also conquered the world of media and propaganda. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who had been known for years in the shadow of death and terror, ultimately met his fate at the hands of the very powers he had fled from. In June 2006, after a long pursuit, Zarqawi was killed by U.S. forces in Iraq. This death did not officially mark the end of a terrorist's life. Zarqawi was killed in a precise airstrike by U.S. Special Forces at a house north of Baghdad. Long regarded as America's #1 enemy, in his final moments, he found himself trapped amidst the ashes of war and terror. However, his death actually marked the beginning of another story. Zarqawi's death, in the eyes of some, marked the end of a brutal terrorist, but in the eyes of others it symbolized something larger. Although Zarqawi was killed, his ideology and thoughts remained alive. In the underground world of jihadism, he remained a symbol for many extremists. His death not only deprived ISIS of its leadership, but also indirectly allowed the caliphate he envisioned to rise from his ashes. Zarqawi was killed, but what he had founded continued to spread relentlessly across the world. His death showed that crime always has a story to tell. Even when the killer is buried, the stories persist. In the heart of darkness, truth is hard to find. But today, you have joined us on this complex and mysterious journey. Thank you so much for being with us in this video and joining us in the search for the truth behind the scenes. If these stories have made you think, please like and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more stories from the dark world of crime and mystery. Feel free to leave any questions, comments, or opinions in the comment section below. We always love hearing from you. Don't forget, crime never sleeps, so neither do we. Until the next video, stay with us in the dark and mysterious world of crime. Goodbye.